Men, are you capable of being just? Olympe de Gouges asked, demanding answers from her audience in her Declaration of the Rights of Women. She spoke on behalf of the population of the women of France, when she declared that a woman is born free and lives equal to man in her rights. She concisely laid out demands that would grant this equality. While the position of women had never been balanced with that of men, a larger threat would come to directly oppose Olympe de Gouges' requests and change French history forever. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. This brought drastic changes to France's ever-evolving society, particularly concerning the rights and treatment of women. That same year, Napoleon released the Napoleonic Code, also known as the French Civil Code. This code gave women the same status as children and the mentally incapable. Particularly, it tethered women to their fathers and their husbands. It stated that the wife owed obedience to her husband, that a woman could not enter into a contract without permission from her husband or father, and she could not make deals when it came to property without consent.
Furthermore, a woman's salary belonged not to herself, but to her husband. Of course, it was not common that women were employed, considering the fact that most women did not have much of an education. Napoleon was particularly opposed to women's education and participation in politics. He even banned political clubs that disagreed with him. One female writer in particular, Germaine de Stael, openly disagreed with Napoleon during a time when not many women would have such courage. Later, Germaine left France rather than dealing with Napoleon's comments and demands. This relationship emphasized what Napoleon thought of women, that the leading lady of the world is she who makes the most children. The Napoleonic Code did not only take away certain rights from French women, but enforced a misogynistic mindset throughout France. Women were utterly controlled by men. This idea, often referred to as the système masculiniste, posed a large obstacle for feminists. The solution was to change the depiction of women in society and fight against the laws preventing female independence and political participation. The reforms that had to be made were for female suffrage and other political rights, education, and marital rights. How can women change the laws of the government without any seat of power?
Not much changed throughout the early 19th century until the Revolution of 1848. During this revolution, citizens of France overthrew King Louis-Philippe. Afterwards, the Second Republic of France was formed, which became a time for increasing reform. The Reformation primarily consisted of proposals to add the right to work and the right to vote to the law of citizenship. The right to work meant that the government would be obliged to give jobs to the unemployed. This was important to citizens as not all men had the right to vote, and many were struggling financially. Though women assisted the men during this revolution, they were not granted equal rights during the Reformation. As petitions to include women in these basic rights failed, it became clear that though the government had changed, society was still under the système masculiniste, after women were omitted from any newly formed political clubs. Women came together to form La Voix des Femmes, a feminist newspaper fighting for women to have equal rights as citizens. Gathering female authors and campaigners, they transformed this newspaper into a widespread organization, helping women become more informed, educated, and independent. This also allowed women to participate in public debate. La Voix des Femmes repeatedly called out the Napoleonic Code and the issues it created, demanding more from the government than the mere subordination they received before. They especially honed in on the right to divorce. Though the newspaper eventually shut down, it fueled many other women's organizations to raise their voices for themselves.
After 1950, the female literacy rate in France increased. This was due to La Loi Fallot, or the Fallot Law, which gave the Catholic Church more power in education. Using this power, the Church opened numerous female primary schools. Therefore, there were more female readers to continue the line of female presses into the next generation. We can attribute the use of the word feminism to this time. As the presses pushed women's rights to a new level, the term feminisme became more widespread. They continued to fight for suffrage and equal rights as citizens, as they once did during the Second Republic. This line of presses as well as feminist groups were vital to this movement. As formal discussion of women's rights continued, French society became more open to these ideas. In 1878, a formal meeting was held during a World's Fair. This meeting was Congrès International des Droits de Femmes, organized by two journalists, Maria Derame and Léon Richet. They covered the same issues that had been plaguing French society for the past several decades. Attending this meeting were people from several different areas, attending the World's Fair, and many French journalists and politicians. This created alliances between feminists globally, a major advantage to all feminist organizations.
While they discussed many controversial topics, the only one that was off the table for them was women's suffrage. However, some refused to dance around this topic. During this conference, a prominent publisher and feminist, Hubertine Auclair, was prevented from giving the speech she had written on women's suffrage. She insisted that, for any real change to be made, the right to vote was essential. In 1876, Auclair founded Les Droits des Femmes, an organization similar to previous groups. She also published a newspaper, La Citoyenne, or The Citizen, emphasizing that all women are citizens and should be treated as such. After several unsuccessful campaigns, boycotts, and appeals, Auclair became discouraged. She then took a break from the movement and settled down with Antonin Lévrier. When he died in 1892, she decided to return to France. However, her group, now called Suffrage des Femmes, had to be rebuilt. By that time, the feminist movement became increasingly widespread throughout France and other nations. Many groups, led by reserved and respectable women, held councils to discuss issues in a civilized manner. Unlike other organizations, Auclair's group participated in many acts of civil disobedience. In 1904, 1 century after the institution of the Napoleonic Code, Auclair publicly burned the code. She also smashed the ballot box on an election day in front of a crowd of voters.
Unfortunately, Auclair did not live to see the day in 1944 when women were finally granted the right to vote. However, because of the French journalists and suffragettes, the movement for women's rights did not slip under the mat. Despite the long-term process of granting voting rights, many reforms were made, gradually granting women their rights as citizens. With society and the government against them, these women made impactful choices to sit down and write, a choice that would later be celebrated by their descendants.